Good day, everyone. So, before we formally start with our discussion for today, I'd like to introduce first myself to you. So, I know that some of you have already known me, while some of you have not. So, for the benefit of those who have not known me yet, I am Mr. Neil Michael G. Olivar, and I am 30 years old. And currently, I'm working at Casate Elementary School sa DepEd ko, handling grade 5 classes. Now, I am connected to BNSC since 2016 as part-time instructor. Then, as to this course, Assessment in Learning, I have been handling this subject for a couple of semesters na. So, in this semester, I will be with you, you as my virtual students and me as your virtual instructor. So we will be navigating, we will be learning deeper more on the principles of assessment in learning. So in here, you will appreciate and you will know the different concepts and the importance of assessment of learning in the school or in education. So as you can see, our first lesson is entitled The Basic Concepts and Principles in Assessing Learning. So obviously, this lesson will just have to tackle, to define, and to get the essence of assessment in learning. We will know here the definition of the different concepts related to assessment in learning. So, the book that we will be using for the entire semester is this. Okay. If ever makaadto mo sa National Bookstore and then makita ninyo siya nga book, please grab a copy kay this book is very important and very helpful for you as pre-service teachers, as teacher education students. Kay importante maning assessment in learning because this will help you become a great or a better teacher to your future students. So you will know here how important assessment in the context of education. So, let us first unlock the term or the concept assessment in learning. So we'll define first the term assessment. Assessment is rooted in the Latin word assidere, which means to sit beside another. It is generally defined as the process of gathering quantitative and or qualitative data for the purpose of making decisions. So in a broader sense, the basic purpose of assessment is to make decisions. Meaning the data you gather from let's say from the people, from your students, will be used by you in making decisions. So assessment is very important in decision making. So let's now associate assessment in learning. So we'll define here assessment in the educational context. So assessment in learning is a systematic and purpose-oriented collection, analysis, and interpretation of evidence of student learning in order to make informed decisions relevant to the learners. So I'd like to highlight first the word systematic. Systematic in the sense that this assessment in learning follows carefully chosen steps. Yeah, purpose-oriented po siya. Purpose-oriented collection, analysis, and interpretation of evidence of student learning. So, what is referred here as the evidence of student learning? This might include the scores of the students, the grades they get from a particular test or from particular performance. So, i-collect ni siya sa mga sa teachers. Kanya, this this data or these grades or this evidence being gathered by the teachers will be used by them in making informed decisions relevant to the learners. So example, um, magama ka o mag-decide ka whether these children deserve to pass your subject. So you should have your basis. You cannot just jump into decision of failing these students. You have to gather first evidences like test scores and grades or performances sa mga bata prior to making judgment, prior to making decisions. So this is why it's very important to have assessment in learning, because through this process, the teacher will be able to really come up with a very well-informed decision and a very relevant decision as to the performance of the students. So, assessment is very important. It's equally important to curriculum and instruction. Diba? Curriculum refers to the subjects offered by the schools or the school. Mga siya curriculum. Instruction, this refers to the curriculum implementation, the way teachers or the way the school communicates or dishes out the subjects to the students. The teaching and learning process refers to the instruction. Now, how can we say that the instruction is excellent? How can we say that the teachers are performing well in the teaching and learning process? Or should I say, how can we say that the students have learned about the topic, have learned about the content, di ba? So, kung sa may itong buhaton na makaingon ta nga, these students have really learned about the topic. So, the teacher will have to undergo assessment. The teacher will have to assess the students' learning. So, that's how important assessment in learning. Meaning, gi-assess ni teacher, gisukod ni teacher how far the students have learned about the topic, how far the students have mastered a particular content, a particular skill or competency. So that's how important assessment in learning towards the education, the quality education of our children. Okay. Okay, there are other concepts related to assessment in learning. So these are measurement, evaluation, testing, and grading. So these four concepts are under the umbrella of assessment in learning. So meaning to say, these four concepts have something to do with assessment in learning because they are interrelated. Okay, first is measurement. This refers to the actual collection of information in student learning through the use of various strategies and tools. So from the word itself, measurement, to measure. So the teacher here is measuring or getting data from the students, the actual collection of information. So when a teacher tries to collect information from the students to check whether the students have learned about the topic, then that is an example of measurement. So, using various strategies and tools. Tools refers to mga questionnaires, test paper baron, or interview question baron, or rubric baron. Okay? Then evaluation refers to the actual process of making decision and judgment on student learning based on the information collected from the measurement. So after the teacher collects or after the teacher collected the information, the scores, take for example during the test, so evaluation na pud ang follow. So, in evaluation, the teacher here judges or makes decision or describes the score of the child. Once mo judge na si teacher sa scores nga nakuha niya from measurement, then that process already is called evaluation. So, lahi ha, measurement, pagkuha lang sa mga scores. Evaluation, pag-judge. Meaning, you describe you describe the scores. Kung ato siyang balansihon, measurement is quantitative in nature. Quantitative since the information gathered here are all in figures, mga numbers. Evaluation, on the other hand, is qualitative. Qualitative siya because it's descriptive in nature. Describe na ni teacher kung unsay iyang ikasulti regarding sa scores nga iyang na-collect during the measurement. Then fourth bullet is testing. So kining testing mo mao ra gud sa measurement. Testing refers to the use of a test or battery of tests to collect information on student learning over a specific period of time. So I think testing is very, very understandable. So the teacher here administers a test to measure the student's learning about a particular topic or a particular chapter or a particular lesson. So na-test si teacher gigama and then iyang gihata sa mga bata then nakuha niya ang score sa mga bata after checking. That's testing. Grading. Grading refers to the process of assigning value to the performance or achievement of a learner based on specified criteria or standards. So grading ang paggrado na sa teachers based sa performance sa mga bata. O example, nagpa-drawing si teacher, nagpa-draw siya, nagpa-art siya. So inang submit, iyang graduhan ang output sa mga bata. And that is grading. Pero grading, there should be basis. May dapat kang criteria or standards. Meaning na kay criteria nga imong basihan sa pag-come up nimo sa grades sa bata, sa iyang output or sa iyang performance. Okay, that's grading. But all these terms are related to assessment in learning because assessment in learning is the umbrella of these four concepts. Okay, there are different types of assessment in learning. So first, we have the formative assessment. This refers to assessment activities that provide information to both teachers and learners on how they can improve teaching learning process. This is formative because it is used at the beginning and during instruction for teachers to assess learners' understanding. So the first type of assessment in learning is formative assessment. So when can we say that a particular assessment is formative? Okay, if this assessment occurs in the beginning and during instruction, then that assessment is called formative assessment. So the very purpose of the formative assessment is for the teachers to reflect, for the teachers to analyze whether he or she has to reteach the lesson or not, whether or she has to change some strategies in order to make the lessons more understandable and more catchy or more interesting to the students. So ang purpose sa ginaning formative assessment is to modify teaching process para mas masabtan sa mga bata ang lesson. So take for example, so nag-discuss na si teacher. In the middle of the discussion, si teacher nangutana, again, what is meant by, yan na. And then who can give me another examples of, so these are examples of formative assessment. Formative siya kay the purpose of the teacher is to check whether the students have understood sa iyang gipangyaw-yaw anang adlaw. So if ever the teacher finds out that all his or her students have have answered the questions, then meaning to say, successful ang delivery ni teacher ana nga particular nga lesson. So masito formative assessment. So ang purpose ra sa formative assessment is to improve teaching and learning process. So if ever the results are good after formative assessment, then the teacher has to proceed to the next lesson. If the teacher finds out low scores during the formative assessment, then the teacher has to reteach the lesson or the teacher has to use another strategy in delivering the lesson. Kaya kini pong formative assessment, mama ni siya po, appeal man po ni siya ani 5-item test or 4-item test na ihatag after the discussion. So, man siya formative assessment. The scores in the formative assessment are recorded but not graded. I-record siya. I-record pero di siya apilong kwenta sa grado. Na naman, because the purpose of administering this formative assessment is just for the improvement of the teaching and learning process. So again ha, kung balikon, ang formative assessment, pwede siya ipangutana or buhaton sa beginning sa lesson, pwede po during sa lesson, anang adlaw. Unya apil na pud aning formative assessment kanang test nga ihatag sa teacher after niyang mag-discuss ana nga particular na topic. So, nag-discuss si teacher, human inghatag siya test, mubo nga ang coverage sa test kato na pong iyang gi-discuss anang adlaw. So, pag-check na nila tanang bata nakuha, then meaning effective ang delivery ni teacher. So the teacher has to proceed to the next topic. Pero kung opposite, like gamay score ang bata, wakapasar. So the teacher has to reteach the lesson using another strategy, using another approach. That's the purpose of formative assessment. Pero again, formative assessment can be also not kanang in a form of katong paper and pencil nga test. Pwede siya in a form of question lang. Nga in the middle of the discussion, the teacher will throw a question to check the understanding of the students. Inagpangutan ng teacher, naka-answer ang bata, so padayon si teacher og yaw-yaw. So those are examples of formative assessment. Now we go to summative assessment. Summative assessment or assessments are assessment activities that aim to determine learners' mastery of content or attainment of learning outcomes. They are summative as they are supposed to provide information on the quantity or quality of what students have learned or achieved at the end of discussion. So from the word itself, summative, meaning this type of assessment summarizes all the learnings of the students. So, harvesting time na ni siya. So, kining summative assessment, ihatag ni sa teacher towards his or her students to check how much the students have learned in a particular unit or chapter or quarter or semester. So, dinagko na ni siya nga test. Sa college, examples ani kanatong prelim, midterm, semifinals, and finals. These are summative assessment. Summative siya in the sense nga di lang kay usa ra ka topic ang coverage sa test kundi daghan siya nga topic. Unya, the scores obtained during the administration of summative tests are both recorded and graded. So graded siya because this summarizes the learnings of the students. So, i-record ni siya and then mo siya basihan po sa grado sa mga bata. That's assessment. That's summative assessment. Okay. Another type of assessment in learning is the diagnostic assessment. This aims to detect the learning problems or difficulties of the learners so that corrective measures or interventions are done to ensure learning. So this diagnostic assessment means or is administered by the teacher in order to identify the strengths and the weaknesses of his or her students. So usually i-administer ni siya before mag-start ang klase. So if the teacher would like to know kung asa ang mga skills nga na-master na sa mga bata ug mga skills nga wala pa na-master sa mga bata, so maghatag siya diagnostic test. So kung nakita niya dito nga, oy kini nga skills, these are the skills that my students got low or my students have not mastered. So adto mag-focus si teacher sa pag-deliver sa iyang lessons. Katong mga skills nga wala pa, skills nga na-master na sa mga bata, so gamay ra ang time nga i-allot ni teacher for the discussion of those skills. Kay in the first place, na-master naman sa mga bata. By the way, kining mga items nga nasa diagnostic assessment, mo siya mga items or mga skills nga wala padung pa lang makatunan sa mga bata. Oh, let me give a concrete example. I am a grade 5 teacher. So, pagka sugod sa klase, ako din gitest ang mga bata. Ni hatag din ko diagnostic test nila or diagnostic assessment. Ang mga topics nga naa atong diagnostic test are the topics in grade 5 nga padung pa lang nila makatunan. Padung pa lang nila tunan. Ako siyang gihatag para makahibaw ko kung asa ato nga mga topics ang mas nanginahanglan og enough time, enough focus nga akong i-discuss. Okay? That's the purpose of diagnostic assessment. Placement assessment. This is usually done at the beginning of the school year to determine what the learners already know or what are their needs that could inform design of instruction. From the word placement, so ning hatag test para imong maggrupo ang mga bata. So ang purpose nimo ani is para nakay kalagyan sa mga bata. So example ani kanang mga entrance test. Di ba mo na mga university nga before mo musod, you will undergo admission test. Ngayon nag-test ninyo after say 2 weeks na nang results. Ang university na magbuot kung unsay kurso nga bagay ninyo based on your scores, based on your the test scores you obtain from the admission test. That's one example of placement assessment. So, namoy para ma-play asa mo dapat angayan ibutang. Ikaw imong base sa imong scores, angayan ka nga BS Ed Math ka. Ikaw base sa imong scores, angayan ka nga BS Ed English ka. Ikaw BEd ka, ikaw HRM ka or sa imong kurso. That's one example of placement assessment. Okay, next type is the traditional assessment. This refers to the use of conventional strategies or tools to provide information about the learning of students. So, traditional assessment refers to type of assessment na kinaraan. Paper and pencil test is one best example of traditional assessment. Kinaraan siya nga type of assessment. Unya, this type of assessment doesn't measure the actual learning of the students. Ano man, test naman siya. Pwede man nga gi-memorize lang sa bata, mao na perfect score siya. Pwede man nga nakatuon lang siya para mao na dako siya og score. So dili nga naka-authentic or ka-real, genuine ang score sa bata obtained from traditional assessment kanang paper and pencil nga test. Okay. So, palagi tayo nang mag-discuss ka. Yung topic is about how to cook sinigang na bangus. Unya, gusto man ka makahibaw nga nakahibaw ba ang bata on how to cook sinigang na bangus. Igamit kag traditional nga assessment imus lang gi-test. So, pag test nimo nila na yung mga bata na perfect. Na perfect sila sa test, pero that doesn't mean nga kahibaw na sila muluto sa sinigang nga bangus. Yan naman, traditional assessment naman inyong gamit. Mas makakuha ka og kanang stronger evidence nga the children have learned how to cook sinigang nga bangus kung imo gusto lang mismo gipaluto. Nya ang tawag anan niya is authentic assessment. Authentic assessment refers to the use of assessment strategies or tools that allow learners to perform or create a product that are meaningful to the learners as they are based on real world. So, sa ato pa, kining authentic assessment, type of assessment ni siya nga mo perform ginang bata or mag-create silang product. O example, balik ta sa akong topic nga katong sinigang nga bangus. So, it's considered authentic if you let the students really cook sinigang na bangus. That's authentic assessment through performance. Kaya performance sila. Pwede po through product. Example, imong lesson is about stitching, tahi-tahi. So, di man pwede nga imos lang teson ng paper and pencil, magsuwat-suwat na sila. Kaya traditional man na siya. So, you will use authentic assessment imo gid silang patahion, magtahi silang apron, yang ilang product is the apron. So, kung hagamas lag apron, then that means to say nga they have learned how to stitch. And that falls under authentic assessment. from the word authentic, meaning real type of assessment, because it really measures the actual performance, the actual knowledge and skills of the students. That makes it authentic assessment. Yes, there are also principles in assessing learning, and these principles are really of great help for us teachers in order to assess our students in the right way or in the correct manner. First, assessment should have a clear purpose. First and foremost, before you administer an assessment, you have to have first a clear purpose. Why do you conduct a particular assessment? And you should have your clear purpose, your objective of conducting the assessment. Para asa man akong gitest sila. So the purpose should be your first step prior to conducting assessment. Second, assessment is not an end in itself. Meaning, inaghuman nimog test, kay test results gathered from the students, you should not stop there. You have to utilize the results obtained from your assessment in order to to improve your instruction, in order to improve the teaching and learning process. Nakita nimo nga my students or majority of my students obtain low scores, so I have to modify my instruction. I have to find more effective strategies to be used. Muna siya, assessment is not an end in itself. It's just the beginning. So you have to have the so-called the utilization of results in order to help students learn about the lessons better. Another, assessment is an ongoing, continuous, and formative process. So it doesn't stop. Assessment is cyclical. It's like a cycle. It doesn't stop. Assessment is learner-centered. So meaning to say, in crafting assessment, you have to focus on your students, their readiness, their needs, their background. Kaya di man siya dapat teacher-centered nga, kinirang i-test, kaya dali at check on, sayo mo nag-check na ako. No, that's wrong. When you craft your assessment, you should always consider your students because assessment is learner-centered, not child-centered. Assessment is both process and product-oriented. Correct. Assessment considers the equal importance of process and product crafted or made by the students. Process, this refers to itong performance sa mga bata. Like sayaw nila. Product-oriented po siya because the students also may submit outputs kanang muhatag sila outputs that will serve as the evidence of their learning. Para ganina katong maggama sila apron or pwede pod mag-drawing sila ang ilang painting, mo ilang output, mo ilang product tibali which would serve as their evidence of their learning. Another, assessment must be comprehensive and holistic. So meaning to say, when you give assessment, you do not just consider one particular aspect of the child. Dapat holistic siya, meaning cover tanan niya nga mga aspects sa iyang life. Example sa iyang mga multiple intelligences dapat ma-cover gina siya in nag-conduct nimo sa imong assessment. Kay kung comprehensive siya o holistic, it will yield a result that would really represent the learning of the student. Okay, kay di man ka bias kay imong cover tanang aspect sa iyang life as a learner. Another, assessment requires the use of appropriate measures. Okay, when conducting assessment, especially kung mga paper and pencil test like mga summative test, dapat your test should be valid. Your test should be reliable. Kasaligan sa di bias. Naiuban nga teacher nga mohatag og test nga makaingon na mas estudyante nga wa mi kaagi ani. So something is wrong with your tool. Something is wrong with your test. So that violates this principle nga assessment should require the use of appropriate measures. Assessment should be as authentic as possible. So if possible, we should always use authentic assessment for us to gather or for us to obtain authentic results, for us to obtain real grades, for us to obtain real information about the students' learning. So that ends our discussion for today's lesson. So I hope that you learned something from my video presentation. So for your first activity, you're going to answer the following questions comprehensively. Okay? So first question, complete the table below in order to compare and contrast assessment in learning with measurement, evaluation, testing, and grading. Then, so natay table diha, na itulo ka columns. Then, 1, 2, 3, 4. Assessment and measurement. Imong i-verso sila. Unsa ilang similarities, ilang kapariha, isuwat nimo diha. And then, unsa po ilahang differences, isuwat po nimo sa atbang. Okay? Then, that corresponds to 80 points. Then, number 2, how important is assessing student learning? That corresponds to 20 points. So, thank you so much, class, for staying with me, for listening with me in our discussion. So, see you in the next lesson. Goodbye.